Hi there, everybody. It is Wednesday, 1 o'clock. We welcome you to the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. We are live and we are interactive, so we welcome you to our show today, along with Edgar Zazwata, ACSA Senior Director of Policy and Governmental Relations. I'm Naj and Edgar, ACSA Senior Director of Marketing and Communications. Again, we welcome you. Go ahead and tell us where you're watching from, your region, your school district. Tell us what's happening out there today. And of course, if you're on YouTube, subscribe to our channel. And if you're here on Facebook, make sure you like the post. There you go, Edgar. I have made sure that I put the requisite promotional opportunities out there for people to jump on. How are you, man?
Good. It's a busy day. It's been a busy week. I know we have a lot to talk about, and I take some, I don't know if solace is the right word, because, you know, I know that when things are busy on our end, what it must mean for our members. And I know there's, unfortunately, a lot of challenges right now, just given what's going on in the state.
Yeah, it has been a really busy week, and we're only midway through this week. So there's been so much information that's come out. We're going to cover a lot of that today. Again, your questions and comments are welcome. Go ahead and tell us where you're watching in your school district, what's happening over there. Let's talk first, Edgar, about the blueprint for a safer economy. We know the big news this week. Now more than 40 counties are in the purple tier, which is the highest tier that you can be in. That's caused a lot of movement here within the school districts, within our communities. And
well, we have our first. It might be that kind of week, because I know, as those of our loyal viewers know, that Naj sometimes struggles a little bit with the internet connection. But what he was going to ask, or what he was talking about, is just the news from the governor this week, that 41 counties are now in the purple tier, given the action that the state took. And the bottom line for schools, I know every school community, and we'll get into a couple of examples, are kind of struggling with, what do we do with this news? The official line from the governor's office, and we'll repeat that, is reiterating their guidelines. If you were already open, if you were in a county that was red, fell back to purple, if your school was already operating, there's no mandate to close. It obviously does impact some of the ability of some to progress in the reopening plans, and there's talk about whether some of those in the purple county can take advantage of the waivers of the small groups. But we understand the practical reality of some of these situations, and working with all of our stakeholders is not an easy one.
Yeah, and we want to say hello to Deb and Carol, our loyal viewers, Angela, Holly, Scott Smith over there at ABC Unified, and Maureen and Sean and that have come out over the last couple of hours. And we'll address both. The LAO has released his report indicating California could see a $26 billion one-time surplus that could help balance the budget for 21-22 fiscal year. But they're also predicting this operating deficit. They think that could face long-term rising deficits that could rise to $17 billion by 2024. The LAO says the state's collected more than $11 billion in tax revenue, more than they anticipated through October. They're warning there's a lot of uncertainty right now. We could end up going $10 billion above or $10 billion below that prediction. So there's a lot to discuss on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a good point, Naj, that for once it's worth reflecting on that we have a little bit of good news. We can't always say that, especially in 2020. But right now, you know, the legislative analyst report is just that. It's just a projection. It's the legislative analyst works for the legislature. Their role is to look at the numbers and see what do they foresee coming. And right now it is some good news. They're saying that for this year, this upcoming year, they do see revenues outpacing what some of those projections were going to be by a pretty significant amount. You mentioned the $13 billion number. With that said, they are still projecting some difficult times ahead. This could be a blip. This could mean that while there is a rebound, the rebound has been very uneven, especially in California. Part of that report indicates that some of our wealthiest Californians, they are seeing a resurgence given what's happened with the stock market and whatnot. But some of our most vulnerable Californians continue to struggle. And I think all of our folks, especially our folks working with our schools and our communities, could see that firsthand.
And so many viewers that have jumped in with saying hello. So good to have all of you, Gloria and Marie and George, Daniel and Mark and Mina. So good to have you guys. Edgar, this is just broken in the last hour or so. At least all of us in education are learning about this, that the board at San Bernardino City Unified School District voted to go full distance learning for the rest of the school year. This is one of the first districts that we are hearing cross this threshold, but there are other counties right now and other school districts that are kind of in this balancing act between purple and how that impacts the school districts.
Yeah, it's interesting. And this on the flip side is probably not good news, right? It's not what we wanted to see. We were hoping that come the new year would be an opportunity for schools to go in the other direction, for more schools to come online. Frankly, in some of our discussions at the state level with senior officials from the governor's office and others in California Department of Ed, they've encouraged our education leaders to continue to try to progress with the reopening plans, that while the situation is bad right now, that we shouldn't necessarily give up on the school year. With that said, I think some of the practical realities are coming into play locally. Another example that we just learned of in Sutter, Yuba counties, they share a public health officer in the small counties. Their county has actually made the decision that they were open, and despite the guidelines that I just talked about, that if you bounce back to purple, you could remain open. County public health has actually mandated that they close the middle schools and the high schools essentially come next week. So that not good news on that front.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to say hello to Jennifer Foss out there. We understand Hoover High School just back from parental leave, so playing catch up. Happy to have you with us today. And then Terry and Gary Zeller, longtime viewers, loyal viewers. Happy to have you guys here. All right. So, of course, the big news, Edgar, is all of those counties, now 41 counties on the purple level here in the state of California. We wanted to talk about the purple level with school districts that already have classes going on, because that's kind of this unique position. So let's bring our guests right now. We have two of them for you today. Tiffany Morse is the superintendent from Ojai Unified School District in Ventura County. Don Austin is the superintendent at Palo Alto Unified School District in Santa Clara County. For our viewers, both of those counties are in the purple, but they have classes going on in some form. So welcome to both of you. I'll have both of you respond. Tiffany first, initial reaction to seeing now 40 plus counties in the purple and how that impacts students in schools.
You know, I'm not going to lie. It's people ask all the time, how are you doing? And I say, if anyone in education says they're doing okay right now, they're probably not being totally honest. It is, you know, it's been hard and it's scary, and it's hard to think that, you know, in the blink of an eye, we will have been doing this for almost a year, right? And the impact on the social and emotional wellness of our students is significant. Our parents are stretched, our teachers are stretched, our administrators are stretched. It's really hard to think about how we can continue to do more to serve our students better. And that's what our community is asking us to do. And, you know, but that's what we have to do. And so I think this news and the widespread changes are just one more change, right, that we're dealing with every day.
And Don, your response?
Well, yeah, I'm going to start with one qualifying statement. My opinions are my own, and it's not for everybody. So if you're easily offended, maybe just listen to Tiffany today. I may do the same. I'm totally outraged by what's happening right now. We didn't go from red to purple. We went from orange to purple in one day with no warning. Our particular district has 66,000 citizens, and we're averaging 10 to 13 new cases a week, and we've already opened with 2,100 students for 6 weeks with 2 incidents, both of which were not as a result of being in school and not spread in school, and the cohorts were closed down immediately. So when I'm looking across the state, it looks like the state's plan is to cure COVID through school districts. But any walk to a park on a weekend shows you that our schools being closed does nothing to stop interaction of great substance. I was driving home last night and saw kids running in groups and hanging out at the shopping center across the street. To think that they're not going to see each other the same or more in potentially even riskier settings is kind of beyond me. So I think the safest places we have right now are school sites. When I go to our elementary school sites, I see everyone in masks, spaced, and with carrying adults. So yeah, I'm very, very disappointed at the blanket move.
Yeah, well, Don, I think just from the perspective of a parent, aside from the work we're doing, I mean, I think some of your frustration and anger is actually somewhat welcome, right? Just given you point to, is this really the right way to go about it? I'm going to go my next question to Tiffany. Tiffany, like Naj set it up, you guys are in one of the counties that are dealing with some of these changes, right? You got into red, we're able to reopen up. Maybe you could give us a little bit of a lay of the land of how that went, how that's gone so far, what it looks like in your district, and then what the recent news has done to some of your your planning and what the reaction from community is as well.
Sure. So we reopened on November 2nd, our elementary programs, our alternative high school, and our special day classes throughout the district. And it was hundreds and hundreds of hours of work to plan for that, to make sure that it was done safely, lots of negotiations with our unions, to make sure that our staff felt comfortable. And I hear you, Don, about kids. My struggle is with my teachers, and I want them to be safe. And, some of them have health conditions that are really difficult. And throughout all of this, one of the things that we are struggling with, and Ojai's a little bit of a rural community, kind of geographically isolated, and we are having trouble getting enough human bodies to do the work that's necessary to stay open. And so that continues to be a struggle. Childcare, are trying to bring back our classes, and if we have aides who are out, or substitutes are a huge issue. So we could not overcome those challenges for our secondary programs. We just could not figure out how to do that. If we have to quarantine students pretty quickly, we're quarantining the entire school. We don't have enough substitutes. So we just brought back elementary. And I have a school board meeting today, and I have our secondary parents who are coalescing into a group that is upset that we did not open and that we are not bringing our secondary students back right now. And there's really no amount of convincing for our logical reasons that helps them to feel better about the fact that they see their children struggling. And so that is the really hard part right now. And so we're scheduled to bring our secondary back second semester. I don't know if we can do that or not. And our parents were like, what's the plan? And the reality is, I don't know what the plan is. And then throw on top of that, our private schools are all open around us. And they're like, why aren't you opening? Every private school, you are the only schools that aren't open, which is true, because everyone else is a private school. And so there's a lot of inequities, and that makes it hard.
Hey, Don, you're one of the biggest advocates for getting the schools back open. I think if anybody has looked at your Twitter feed, they would see you've got pictures, you've got videos of your kids back in school. The schools have been open since mid-October there in your district. What was the strategy to get all of that together, whether it was facilities or transportation or food service or PPEs? And then how has that evolved over time?
First of all, Twitter gets me in trouble, so don't try to copy that approach. That'd be funnier if it wasn't true. My approach was don't bend. I think everyone was looking for that crack. People were pushing hard on, well, let's just delay a decision. We're rushing. Everything. You started hearing the same talking points. You're rushing. It's not safe. We don't want to be first. We want to be safe. It's like, well, we're not even close to first if you look around the country. So then our board was solid. And one thing I would say seriously to everybody is, if your beliefs don't align with your board, you probably want to be careful about that right now. We're seeing good people get sideways with their boards right now, and that's a danger. So you need to understand that reality also. But our board wanted to prioritize elementary school, so we got them back first. We put secondary schools on the back burner. We had just board approved reopening January 7th. The move to purple, I mean, let's just be real about a calendar. You have to be in red for 2 weeks. And we're not going to go to red as a county anytime in the near future, partly for politics, my opinion, that they're not going to want schools in red or below heading into holiday season. It's you have predictable outbreaks. They don't want to see this yo-yo, so they're going to put it in purple, try to shut everything down. So, I've just drafted my memo. I'm very close to announcing that we're not going to reopen secondary schools this year, especially our high schools. I just think the math, when you look at a calendar, it's just not a reality now. And I'd say for the people that put off elementary schools, that path is going to be harder. And I think you're going to see a lot more waiver applications, but with a tougher story to have to tell. So it just, the whole thing got harder for everybody.
Yeah, no, I think that's well put, Don. Question for both of you. Actually, a question from one of our loyal viewers, Angela, and we were joking. We almost need to give her some credit here for writing with some good questions. But this is something that's been talked about a lot, especially given what they're finding in Europe, or Don mentions what's happening in other parts of the country. This question of, okay, in places where their schools have been open and we're seeing uptick in cases, how much, when they look at contact tracing, how much is that coming from the schools? Or is public health really finding that that's coming from other segments? Both of you, please touch on this. We'll start with Tiffany.
So we have, as I mentioned, we're small and isolated, and actually our particular town's data, we are in the yellow. We're in the lowest tier, but our county is in purple. And so we have only had one positive case so far. It happened yesterday. We did the contact tracing, but like everyone else, we know that our high school kids are at parties on the weekend. We know our staff are at parties and gatherings on the weekend. And so I expect that we will see more and more of this coming from places that are not our schools. But because our high school isn't open across the board, we just have targeted assistance. I don't think we'll see as much contact tracing coming from the schools. And the research shows that elementary is just not really the place. Even in our county, our data shows that elementary is just not the place where spreading is occurring as much as it is in homes.
Yeah.
Colorado, Gil. And I know that a lot of districts have focused, those ones that can't open up in the manner that you guys had, small groups, making sure that the vulnerable groups have access. What are some of the strategies that you guys put in place initially to get some of those students back in, if it was in the form of small groups? And maybe what are you hearing from your colleagues in other parts of the state about getting those small groups in, at least as an initial part of getting the students back in the classroom? Don, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I'd say with our special education groups, that was beautiful. We brought back students. Autism is big in our community. We were able to bring back students who really needed to be with us, and their parents' hearts were just breaking, unable to serve their own kids at home and not having the services. That was a total victory. That was our first group back in September. But I'm going to point to a failure also, and a failure and a realization. When we brought back kids that we thought needed additional support, but put them in rooms with adults, but they're watching their classes online somewhere else, the reality set in. When I went in there, watched it, is what a kid's experience looks like in isolation. And even the people that have said, hey, like, it's better this year. Kids are engaged, the instruction's better. Well, better than bad is still bad. And to see what it looks like to watch a kid stare at a screen and either have some engagement or none, wearing a headset all day long is just, it's hard to even watch. So, tomorrow we're bringing our whole group together and we're talking about how we can make it more fun, even if it means a little less learning. And we're already planning for summer school. And this year's summer school, I told our staff, think of everything you know about summer school, then forget it. And let's come up with a way to interject and to bring back some life in the summer. I don't care if it's all elective classes, but what we're missing is it's just indescribable. So that the one thing I'd say is for elementary schools, we have this exactly backwards. We thought bring back the high school small groups first, and because elementary would be harder. And that was actually backwards. It was easier for us to better serve and support the elementary school students. The high school students were more locked into their synchronous time in regular classes.
Yeah, we had the exact same issue, Don, and I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to answer with we've had a failure as well, which is that exact same thing where we brought our most vulnerable students who were failing back and it felt punitive. They are just sitting in a room. We hired teachers to help them, but the teachers are like, all I'm doing is watching them listen to other teachers. This isn't effective for me. I don't feel like I'm having meaningful contributions. So we actually are at Thanksgiving, we're going to decommission that program and we started from scratch and we've been trying to think about, just like you are, how can we bring kids back in a way that's fun, that doesn't feel punitive, that's helping them get that social emotional connection that they really need. And you're right, we have to keep retooling it because we don't know how to do this. We thought we did and it's not working. So we have to keep trying.
We were noticing on the chat, and we actually love to see this because part of what our intent here is not only to get engagement and get questions, but we just see folks interacting. I think everybody's living a shared experience, no matter what part of the state you're on. And I think just hearing your stories is resonating with folks in terms of what they're dealing with in their respective schools. I was initially going to ask you, how it's going with distance learning and whatnot. You both already kind of touched on that. So I'm going to reframe my question a little bit in terms of, we obviously made a departure from how things were going in the spring. There was a big to-do both at the state level and in individual districts that we had to do things differently because what was going on in the spring as it related to distance learning wasn't the answer. I think we're now learning new lessons here with this new part, with the first part of this new year. I mean, what pivots are you already seeing that you may have to already make? Don talked about maybe having to rethink and making it more fun, especially in both of your situations where you're seeing that, at least for your secondary students, they're going to be in this, unfortunately, for the long haul. So what new lessons are we learning and what additional adaptations are you having to make? Let's start with Don.
I'd say secondary cohorting is nearly impossible.
Yeah.
And so we're looking at things like, are there opportunities? And if not, I want to know why not. So we're asking these questions for students to work ahead. If a student over the summer can knock out, let's say they're a sophomore, they can knock out their junior English class over the summer, that helps us with cohorting next year, frees up space. But one thing we notice is unless you create whole new schools for distance learning, this back and forth piece isn't going to work at secondary. It can, it's still not great, but it can work at the elementary school levels because third grade is third grade. But when you get in the high school and you have a breadth of programs, it's impossible to replicate. You're looking at third-party vendors. Sometimes that works for a district, sometimes it doesn't. You play around with live streaming. Maybe that's something that needs to be back on the table for us. I don't know. But I think we really need to think about how can we possibly put us in a better position for cohorting so we can close that valve off next year. Instead of having a school with 2,000, you have 3 or 4 cases, you're closing down 2,000 students. So I think that's a place where the next level of creativity needs to really be focused.
Tiffany, Nadine?
Yeah. So, I agree. The secondary cohorting is a huge problem. We moved to a block schedule this year, and like a month before school started, and gosh, it was really hard for our parents in our community. If we normally would have made that shift, we would have spent a lot of time doing community engagement, and we just did it. And people are still sometimes complaining about it, but our kids only have 3 classes. And we have not seen the super high DNF rates that other districts are seeing in distance learning. And I think it's because we only have 3 classes. Even though it's hard for our parents, I can't imagine doing this with 6 classes for our teachers and our students. So I think we have to be really thoughtful about our schedule. And then and Don was kind of alluding to this, but we have to focus on engagement over content. The staring at a screen is not going to help our kids with content. We have to learn how to engage them. And I think it's really hard. And I teach an online program myself, a doctorate class, and I was not a good teacher until the 4th year I did it. It was so different. And I was a really good classroom teacher. And so our teachers are all like first-year teachers. And when you're a first-year teacher, it's really hard to learn how to engage. And we have to engage in a different way. And I think we don't know how to do that yet, but that's our work, to make our students feel like they're engaged and not just staring at a screen and not just wasting 6 hours a day or 5 hours a day.
You know what? I do want to ask both of you. Edgar and I talked about the LAO report earlier in the broadcast, and I know that we're going to just really quickly shift here from the distance learning and the in-person learning to talk about money, because there's some good news, but I want to get your reactions. Do you look at this as good news right now, or just like that first step that's good, but we have to plan for really tough times ahead? Don, I'll have you start.
A couple things. To be fair, we're a basic aid or locally funded district, so it impacts us a little differently. But let's talk about how we got to the good news. This is an awful time for our state, but our state's financial structure is built on the very, very top earners. That it shows again how even COVID is disproportionately impacting different people. The people that have money and are advantaged or in great positions are making money and doing really well right now. And I'm not disparaging that. But at the same time, there are people losing jobs and are struggling. It's just another indicator of even our financial system is set up to advantage and disadvantage certain people. Practically speaking, it sounds like right now, I know there's a little bit of guesswork in this, that it's most likely going to cut down on the deferral rate and not really be much beyond that. But, some good news, but some good news coming from kind of a bad circumstance.
I just read EdSource, and the headline in EdSource is "Huge One-Time Windfall." And honestly, that made my stomach hurt. Right? This isn't a huge one-time windfall. We have so much we still have to deal with, deferrals, so much additional costs. And I am concerned about that messaging and that idea that all of a sudden schools have all this cash and that we're going to be just fine, because I don't think that's the case. And I'm concerned about that, the way that message is portrayed right now. And I think it's too early to say that, but I know we're looking for some positive news in the world, and it seems like positive news, but I worry about the long-term implications of that.
Sean Bell had a question for us, noting that the increasing rates of bad grades, D's, F's, or just this whole notion that we are seeing an impact in kids' academics seems to be a national issue and something that they're getting asked a lot about. How do we address that? How's that playing out in your respective communities?
Yeah, happy to take that one on. I think I made a mistake. Last year, we were one of the first to go to credit, no credit. And we pushed really, really hard on that and took some flack for it. but it ended up avoiding D's and F's for our students. Our credits were up. We weren't negatively impacted by D and F. Reflecting on that, I don't know why I didn't try to advocate for exactly the same thing this year. I'm hearing districts that have 300% and 400% increases in D's and F's. We're not, but I'll tell you what's dropped off. Our middle disappeared.
Yeah.
We have more A's and B's, and then the people that were struggling, our D's and F's as a whole are down. Our students with multiple D's and F's exploded. So the students that really needed us the most are gone. So the problem isn't better than it was last year, and I'm kicking myself for not advocating for continuation of the credit, no credit. It's the least important thing we're doing right now, minus state testing. That's for another show.
Oh yeah, we'll have plenty to talk about state testing in the weeks to come.
In our district, as I mentioned, our D's and rates say, I was just preparing this for my board presentation today. It's exactly the same, the exact percentage. And again, I credit the block schedule. We have 3 classes. Students only take 3 classes each semester in a block schedule. They're 80-minute blocks. So they're really only working on those 3. Then we took the students who had about 2 weeks before the end of the first quarter. We took the students who were failing and we kind of divided them, our administration divided them into red, yellow, and green. And the green ones, we had the teachers reach out to. We have a built-in student support period in distance learning, so kind of office hour time. The teachers took those. The yellow students, we had our counselors take them and work with them. And then the red students, who were students that we knew, high risk of failure, had failed last year, et cetera. Our administrators took those. They started with home visits, and they really worked with those students prior to the end of the quarter so that we could help figure out what those students needed to be successful. And even with all of that, we have the exact same rate, but it's better than a higher rate.
I'll ask one more question. We'll start with Tiffany this time. Robert Adams asks, when you say you're focusing on 3 classes, does it mean you're block scheduling with 3 classes each day or focusing only on ELA and math? Both of you spoke a little bit of how your schedules are working. So Tiffany, maybe just clarify how you guys are making it work, and then we'll go to Don.
So at the high school, we have 3 classes each day. They're regular. So our students would have taken 6 classes. So now they just had the first 3 first semester and the second 3 second semester. At our middle school, it's a little different. We have core classes. So each student has 2 core classes. And then they have a 3rd period elective. And then everybody is doing independent study PE to get all of the classes in that they needed.
Don?
I think if we open next year, we're going to take Tiffany's schedule. It sounds pretty good.
Hey, let me ask you guys before we let you go here. Dawn, your district's website talks about being ambassadors of hope. And one thing that Wes Smith always does at the end of his broadcast on Mondays is ask about what brings you hope. So Dawn, I'll start with you, and then Tiffany. What brings you hope as we move through this second half of the school year and how we embrace our school community?
You know, as a rule, I'm pretty optimistic. That's why I still have my Chargers hat behind me. They still got a chance. No, I tell you, it's like everyone else. There are days when I wake up and it just feels like I've been punched in the face over and over and over. But I know that if I'm not hopeful that we can move through this, nobody else is going to be. It goes back to that old thing when the principal sneezes, everyone's got a cold. And keeping your head up. People ask me every day, how's it going? Phenomenal. It's great. It's going to be good. Trying to find the wins and the victories. I just got to tell you, it is. It's hard right now. This is the absolute hardest time of all of our careers. And even after a hard board meeting and just getting slammed in a board meeting, but coming to a plan where we approved our reopening of secondary schools, and it feels like it was all for nothing because the next week that's ripped away. we just have to be hopeful that it cannot continue like this forever. It's like a bad run on a blackjack table. Just keep hoping for that winning hand. I don't know. It's out there somewhere.
So my assistant superintendent and I used to joke that we couldn't both be having a bad day at the same time. You know, in March, we were saying, okay, it's your turn to have a bad day, and then I'll carry it, and then you have a bad day. And then she told me this story about how she was talking to our union president on Zoom, and the union president said, "Why are you so happy?" And she said, because I was talking to the office manager at the middle school, and she's always so positive. And she said it just made me feel better talking to her. And I just had this light bulb go on. I always have to be that person. I always have to be like that office manager. When people talk to me, they have to walk away and feel better, because if I don't own that, no one will be able to own that. And so I stopped having bad days. I come in and I, just like Don was saying, I wear yellow all the time. It's kind of a joke in my district, but I am a ray of sunshine. And if I don't feel like a ray of sunshine, I just look like one when I'm wearing yellow. I'm wearing black today because I have a board meeting for another reason. But I consciously try really hard to just be a ray of sunshine every day. Except
sunshine. That's
so
good.
I was going to say, some of your fellow superintendents may maybe go with you with that analogy of black on board meetings.
I'm not saying this is my funeral. I'm just saying it might be.
Tiffany Moore, Superintendent from Ojai Unified School District in Ventura County, and Don Austin, Superintendent at Palo Alto Unified in Santa Clara County. Tiffany, Don, thanks so much for being with us today. It's been great having you.
Thank you
Great,
both.
thank you.
Wow, that was really great. Edgar, ACSA Executive Director Wes Smith, sent out a message earlier today to members talking about the need for positivity, for remaining positive for our school communities. School leaders, they need hope, they need positivity right now. And we understand, we know there's that desire to get students back into the classroom. We know how valuable it is right now to get students back into the classroom. And we also know that there are districts that have put out those dates and those markers for getting students back into school. And it's important to keep that in mind, to keep that really in the thought process, because right now we do have so much of a need to get these students back into school, as you just heard.
Like you said, Naj, I think right now the message, at least from ACSA, and we're trying to assist the state in some of the communications of reminding folks that despite what happened in the last week with the change of designation or whatnot, to really encourage folks to continue on with that planning process, to really continue on with thinking about when the situation changes, just like our fellow superintendents here, in terms of how they're going to get these students back into school, reminding them that if you're in a situation where you opened up, even with the change of designation, that you could continue in-person instruction, that even it might be difficult, and we understand that, and the operational realities that those entail, but even if you're in a county that's purple, there is a few options for at least some of your students, right? Whether that be the elementary waiver, the small cohorts, and just really encouraging folks to continue on with that planning process, with the ultimate goal is that at some point that the situation could change and the state is gonna look on our folks, right, to see how is it that we're gonna get kids back into the classroom.
With Robert Frosto, who's the superintendent over at Kerman Unified in Fresno County, and ACSA board member there in the purple right there. And he's really taken that small group aspect to heart, because he brought students back, some groups of students back to school. The largest group did not have connectivity, and that's one reason why he brought them back. But also, the EL students, or the students that are struggling with the English language. He saw the need to have those small groups, and I think it's important for us to make sure we remind that we want to make sure the kids get into school, but only when it's safe for them to do so. In the meantime, there's that opportunity to get these students back in the small groups and get them back into that classroom environment.
Hey, Naj, one other thing we wanted to remind our folks that we're partnering with the California Collaborative on Educational Excellence, the governor's office, trying to get the word out. They're going to put together a session tomorrow, and we'll make sure you go to our website, and we've sent this out to our members in terms of getting folks before some of the public health officers. Dr. Galley, who you see as part of the weekly press conferences with the governor, Dr. Erica Pond, who's the state health officer, they're going to do a special session specifically for educators, for school leaders, to talk through some of these dynamics, talk through what are their options, even as we're in this low point in regards to the COVID situation. So we'd encourage folks to jump on there tomorrow at 2:00.
That's right. And Gianna Miller, who's our social media whiz, she has put that link to that Zoom meeting in the chat. So go ahead, take a screenshot of that, but also know that Wes put out an email earlier today, probably in the 11 o'clock hour, that also has the direct link to that, because we know any opportunity to hear directly from the health experts here in the state, obviously very important. All right, Edgar, man, this was a great show today, a busy week. We are off next week for the Thanksgiving holiday, but then we're back next week, and Edgar promises a really great guest. So
no pressure. Hey, let me just take a second just to thank our folks. Thank those folks that have been in with us day in, day out. Thank you, Naj. This is it's always a highlight of the week, and obviously amongst these tough times, there's still a lot to be grateful for. And obviously we're grateful to all of our education leaders and what they're doing for our state and for our kids.
Yep, absolutely. Edgar, good seeing you.
Thank you. I'll see you, Naj.
Thank you guys very much for being with us today on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Again, we're off next week, but we're back right after that, the following Wednesday, with more news and information and more insight from our education leaders. Have a great rest of the day.